I don't know why I'm so overly interested in common threads. Maybe it indicates a storyteller personality, which kind of aligns with a lot of my career path and interests. I get deeply hooked at a story's ability to create multiple points of interest and then cleverly stitch them back together. I remember walking out of the movie theater in Scottsdale, Arizona after watching Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia like I had just seen God, while my companions all complained about the 3 hour runtime. I love a good callback. It makes comedy more funny when it's also smart and clever. It absolutely kills in songwriting when clever threads are sewn in, not by generic repetitive choruses, but a bridge that can tie a bow on a nugget dropped in each verse, or concept album, even better. I started writing songs in my head, trying to be clever with common threads before I even knew how to make music. Something we discussed in common with Sammy Volkov, an old soul, well traveled singer songwriter based out of Edmonton and Portland. Ironically, when a storyteller starts spilling their own story, they let humility gloss over common threads. What is really interesting about someone? How did they arrive to this point? What happened at each stop along the way? If you can find a thread, however thin, go with it. Maybe that's a lesson or a pro tip. I don't know. But when all the details and filler of a life are thrown down on a page or up on a screen, we all just kind of want to get to the magic that connected the dots. Sammy Volkov almost missed the magic, but we found it. A young person looking for the chance to be something more than just what they are good at, or even told what they should do, and chasing it around the biggest centers in dramatic fashion, internally workshopping a life that externally was not yet realized until it found its time. Sammy has settled back from the big city charms of New York, LA, and Toronto to the real charm of Edmonton and Portland, to audaciously abandon the obvious opportunities for personal workshop of a career in music. Releasing a sophomore album just last week, Songs from the Goodbye Garden, Sammy Volkov fearlessly blends AM radio era voices with hi-fi genre blending arrangements and modern lo-fi indie charm, weaving common threads through eras of inspiration with audacious self-assurance in that voice. My name is Glen Erickson. This is Almost Famous Enough. Thanks for spending your time with us. This is Sammy Volkov.
Happy to. This is great. I appreciate you taking the time for this, Sammy. I know you're right around the corner from releasing an album, so I mean that's something to obviously talk about right off the bat. But that tends to be a lot of things going on. But I'm sure very much the focal point of your time and energies right now. So there's different places I like to jump in with people. I don't always just focus on the latest record type thing. I'm often interested in sort of how you got to where you are right now with what the latest record is. But let's start for a second with the latest record. So March 5th is the release date that I think I saw. Yep. So that's right around the corner, like at the end of this week and of when we're recording at least. And Songs from the Goodbye Garden, technically your second full solo record. We can talk about some of the other stuff that you've been working on, but here's where I want to know right off the bat, Sammy, like a couple things. Because I'm always interested in how the industry keeps changing, right? And so my curiosity immediately lands, like if we were to run into each other somewhere and just you started telling me you have a new record out. My first question might be along the lines of, like, what do you do these days to promote a record? Like it used to be so, it was just so prescribed for so long through my growing up and through a lot of years. And not only has like the digital transformation kind of threw it on its head over the last 15, 20 years, but even I think the last 5, 6 years of the change in the media landscape on every layer has changed so much. So I'm just curious from your perspective as a younger person, just kind of getting into this world of like, how do I do this? Like, how do you get into the promotion of a new record these days? What are you doing?
I wish I knew.
Well, you
I
have a
feel like,
publicist. That's a good start.
yeah, I got Jason Schneider to help me out. In the past, I had worked with Jason more kind of formally, like from the first single through to the album's release. This time, I just did the 3 singles by myself and brought him on board much later to try and help me with kind of opening some doors and, getting some access to people who may listen to the record and help kind of, spread the word about it.
Yeah.
What I've been doing is just sort of trying to stay in touch with people I admire musically and follow their lead. So, one person who I always look to as an example is Mariel Buckley.
Yeah.
Really admire their music, and she's just killing it. Yeah, how to promote an album? I don't even really know. I mean, I do try to do what I see people doing, and like, but it doesn't really give me any peace of mind.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me jump in, because you sort of said a thing there that I find is interesting, Sam, which is, the idea that you are emulating people that are around you that would inspire you, and you're referring to more accessible people, right? Like people that you've probably either shared stages with at different shows or ran into at different music events, or so people that you've got to hear their music, you admire their music or their performance, and also met them personally and discover they're not an asshole and they seem to know what they're doing. Or and the reason I jump on that point, which I think is interesting, because I think so often artists, and as artists, we talk about, when we first get started and what inspires us to start making records or writing songs and then making records, and that always comes before the business, right? Like the inspiration and the art comes before the business. And the emulation is often part of that conversation. Like, who inspired you? Who are you? Who was your North Star? Like, whose career would you want to be like, or things like that. But that's a very different conversation than like, how am I looking at people to know how they do the business of music, right? So I find that really interesting that you sort of stated like, like you're looking around to see like, how do they do it? And I think that's a real accurate part that a lot of people don't always realize. I mean, let me ask you this as well, because I've seen, like, you've got a lot of great players that have played with you, people from the local scene that are very well known as very good players and have played in a lot of, very good bands and made a lot of good music coming out of Edmonton and Alberta in general. How did you get to the point where you formed those relationships? How did you sort of find your way into being, I don't know at what level of like either like just using them, or whether they become friends and they're a part of, the circles that you run in? How did you kind of get to that point of, being what on the outside appears to be pretty good at forming relationships with the right people?
Well, I'm glad it looks that way. So the people who played on this new album, they're like, best of the best. And they have become my friends too. And some of them are my friends going into it, which is kind of the best thing ever. If you can work on a project and you're working with your friends, like, that's a dream. And but I think a lot of these people I met through going to shows in Edmonton, and I saw them playing in bands, and I just really liked what they were doing. And when it came to the production of the album, like the recording, what happened with that one was actually I went to Blackbird Music here in Edmonton on White Ave, and I got the latest Face Healer album, and I played the record, and right away I said to my partner, like, "Oh, I gotta ask Rennie Wilson to produce this album." And I only say that because I think it's sort of a good example of how my brain works. It's like I see or hear someone and I like what they're doing, and I just kind of have the audacity to ask them if they want to work with me. And more often than not, they do.
Yeah. So are you like, audacity is a great word. Are you an extroverted person? Do you consider yourself an extrovert person, a charismatic person? Is like
No,
historically, is that that's not
no,
an easy thing for you to do, or sort of a natural? Because you hear about these people and, they're like, yeah, their parents would be like, yeah, they were always just like a little hustler going around the street doing stuff like,
no,
you
not
know,
at all. No, I think I'm pretty hopeless socially, actually. um, I feel like I'm getting worse. And I guess what it is that gives me that confidence is that I feel like the only thing I'm really good at is singing and sometimes writing. And so like I've spent my whole life just totally burying myself in music I love. And so I feel like that's kind of where I almost have a bit of, if not authority, just confidence. Like I can
yeah,
approach someone and I know where I'm coming from, and I feel like I know how to present myself in that context in a way that I might win them over, or at
yeah,
least we could have like an understanding.
yeah.
So, that's when I feel more relaxed with people if I get to talk about music. That's maybe the only time I'm really relaxed meeting
Mm,
someone.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that kind of pulls a little more out of you
Yeah.
when it comes to all of that. Yeah, I mean, because it's not very easy to make those relationships. Like I know in my story when I was like, okay, I want some of this stuff to happen. It's very, very similar, right? Is I was playing with people and some of my friends playing with a couple of different bands, and they weren't the go-getters, and I wanted more shows. And I start asking, and I sort of just figured out that there were like 3 guys that seemed to book most of the venues at that
Yeah.
time around the city. And then I needed to go just sit around on bar stools and hang out and get to know these guys and sit at shows and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you're right, there is that for lack of a better term, audacity to just be willing to put yourself out there,
Hmm.
and see what comes of it. You referenced a bit about growing up. I like doing this. I like going back and finding out how you got to where you are, and especially because we don't know each other. Like I sometimes
Hmm.
have people on that I've got long relationships with and maybe know more of the story. Obviously, it's a podcast. It's not just for me. It's for other people's benefit too. But so take me back. I'm curious about your upbringing. I'm curious about sort of how you found your path into music and who you are. I'm curious about where I saw you listed as Portland/Edmonton artist a
Oh
number
yeah.
of times. So I'm curious about this connection. So maybe take me back to like sort of where you kind of grew up in your foundational, era of how music sort of introduced itself, like whether you had a musical family or the place you were in. Where did all this kind of begin for you, Sammy?
Well, I always think about it as being here in Edmonton. So right now I'm in my parents' home, and I live in Portland as well. So I was sort of like a barnacle on the ship of my partner's career, and so she's doing her postdoc in Portland, Oregon, and we just decided that I could go too, and I'm a dual citizen, and so is she. So it was very lucky. Like we didn't
Yeah.
know that obviously when we met, but it's just turned out that made it okay for us to travel together, and that's beginning to prove to be like quite a boon for my career because I can play in the U.S. and Canada and not worry about visas and stuff, which is a huge impediment I know for a lot of
Yeah. They
musicians
did
here.
really. Yeah.
So, but anyway, all that said, yeah. So that's the whole beginning of like my brain being warped by music and like you know specifically old music becoming like all I ever thought about as a young person would just be I think from the radio. So I remember hearing the radio when I was really little, and then my parents got me like a little wind up radio, and like AM radio was still used,
Mm-hmm.
and I would listen to like the Oldies channel. I'd put the radio under my pillow, and I think it like broke my brain because I was like training myself even when I was sleeping to sort of think in those ways. So like a lot of my music sounds sort of retro, but I don't really consciously do that at all. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
always like I'm necessarily aware of
Mm-hmm.
trying to copy someone, but that's just like actually how my brain works. And but then in Edmonton I would just kind of being as socially useless as I am, I would spend like all my free time going to garage sales and like flea markets and thrift stores and stuff, and like antique malls. And some of my favorite memories would be like
Which
on the
Edmonton
weekend
has plenty of. Yeah.
Yeah, Edmonton is great for
So
that.
many.
I would get my parents had the newspaper, and I'd go to the classified section and circle places that, people had said they had a garage sale, and if they had records, I had a map, and I'd circle their address on the map, and I'd go off on my bike and bike all day to get to some like weird garage in a suburb. And my favorite memory was I went to this suburban garage, and this super cool old lady was there, and I wish I had spoken to her more. I don't know anything about her, except I think she said she was in a band, which is so badass because she was like 73. And I told her I loved records. I think I was like 12 or 13, or maybe up to 14. And she said, well, they weren't for sale, but I've got a box of records back in the garage there, like under this sheet. And she pulled them out, and there was this incredible box of like beautiful early to mid 50s R&B and like doo-wop and rock. And I think she could see that I was like a kindred spirit, so she kind of just let me have them, for, I don't know, $20 or
Wow.
something for like a box of these beautiful records. And so that was like a fundamental moment in my life. It wasn't just the music and the magic of the records, but it was also making this kind of cool connection. And yeah, these records were just like an amazing escape. I could like create my own world, and that was my favorite thing. It became my favorite thing. It still pretty much is my favorite thing. So
you
that's
were
kind of who I
13.
am.
Yeah, you were 13 or 14. So she probably was actually 53. You just thought she was 73. Because I've always, I look back all the time, and I remember thinking how old I thought some people were when I'm just kidding. But
No, it's probably true.
that's that's really formative. So that music influence was really sort of your own, I guess, your own pursuit, right? Like you just like it, just you kind of got exposed, and you just, I mean, I like that a lot, Sammy. It feels so natural and not forced, right? It's not like my parents made me start taking piano when I was 5, and I had to, these different, and they're all valid. They're different stories that people have. But there's this sort of sense that just your natural spirit just followed this thing that got introduced to your life, and you couldn't help yourself, which is pretty great. So you already tipped off that like your love of music from a certain era, in a sense, which like I'm sure that this ends up being a part of every conversation you ever have to have in media or press, or even just regular folks at shows and stuff, everyone gets fascinated when a young person attaches themselves quite a bit to what we would consider more era defined genre or things. So talk a bit more. I'm very curious about how that continued to develop in you at such a young age, because in its own way, that's extremely counterculture. To just continue to sort of allow, and like you said, I think, right, that it's not like you were trying hard to emulate or recreate a thing. It's just what comes out. Which I can totally understand. Like if you get shaped by a love of, you don't even know it, you know it now, that you're actually being shaped by song structure when you think that you're just being shaped by a melody, they get tied together, and somehow when you start making your own music, you end up knowing that that's the box I know how to put this thing inside of. So how did that start coming out for you? At what point, right? Like when do you start? I don't know whether you started with singing or whether you had to start learning some instruments to kind of help you bring this stuff out. How did that start to come around for you?
Well, I started coming up with melodies and even writing down some words when I was like 7 or something. And I remember it was a secret. Like I hid it in my room. And one time my mom found like a little page. I had written a song on it. And I think I was 7. And it went, Peggy Sue, I always want to be with you. I know our love will be so true. Whoa, whoa, Peggy Sue. So it was like, I was 7 and I was already writing like, 1957 weird like rip off Buddy Holly stuff. But so I was already doing it, and I don't really know why, because I hadn't seen anyone do it or been encouraged to do it, and I was like embarrassed about it. Like I remember it was found, and I was like really, really embarrassed. And so, but I kept doing. I would always make up little songs in my head, And then I went to an acting school. Jumped a bunch of years, and at that school, we were working on plays and scripts and all that stuff. But I found the only thing I was really connecting with deeply would be anytime there was music. And that school kind of taught me to, it taught me a lot of things, but the most important thing it taught me is that it's like, okay to have faith in your own ideas, So
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time where I thought, well, maybe these little songs I come up with, I could write them down and not be so embarrassed. And, ideally I could write them down with some chords, and then I could make some little voice memos of myself strumming guitar along with the words and the music. And again, I had no reason to do it. Like, I don't know why I did it. If anything, it was sort of like a distraction. Like, when I should have been focusing on plays and auditioning and stuff, I never did that ever. Like, I would never spend my time reading a play. I'd go home and listen to records and write songs and try to go to open mics and stuff. So that was pretty telling, but I still stuck with this 4-year program. And then by the time I finished it, I felt pretty lost. And the only thing I had that I was sort of proud of, I had like 8 songs or something. Maybe some of them were like half songs. But I moved to California and I had an agent there. And I was working as a door-to-door salesman for Greenpeace. Every day I would drive to a different part of LA County, and I'd have a map and I'd have to go to every door, and it was just exhausting. But what was cool is that it gave me tons of time in a car to listen to music and come up with songs. And each day I'd pick an artist to focus on, and then I'd go home and very consciously try to write a song in that style. So I would pick like Webb Pierce and then go home and try to write a 50s country song. And then I'd pick Joni Mitchell and try to do a Joni Mitchell song, and then Jackson Browne and try to do a Jackson Browne song, and Solomon Burke and Bobby Blue Bland, and all these weird kind of disparate sources. And it was sort of like a school. I had just finished doing acting school, and now I went home and would focus on music in this kind of structured way. And anyway, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to get at is that like that was the time where I really started to very seriously work on writing music. And that was in like 2015.
Yeah. And that's very intentional emulation. I think everybody starts trying to emulate something like we had talked about before that inspires them, and it happens in different ways. That's a very intentional way to choose to do it. Like, I'm going to try to write specifically this style of song or this kind of thing and see if I can do it and figure it out. But we got to back up, because you said you moved to California and then you're selling for Greenpeace in LA County, so I'm like, okay, wait. Like, how old are you when you're moving to LA? Because the last time check I had, when you were 13 or 14, and you're with the 73-year-old woman in a garage alley, and then you're moving to California with Greenpeace. Like, are you a young man? Did your family move? Did you move by yourself? What was this this big move?
Well, so I went to that acting program in New York because I could do it as
New York
out
too.
Out of state.
We got to add this in too. So we're New York.
Well, yeah, because in high school, I had a teacher who encouraged me to do acting, which was great. But what's actually funny is that I only went down that path because I sang a song in class one day, and it was the first time I ever sang in front of anyone. Was in high school, and everyone really liked it. And the teacher was like, "Oh, that was actually really good. Like, you could do that." And I thought, they're just being nice, but it's kind of fun. Like, I do like this music a lot. And what it was a short play about zombies. And I decided that there could be like a moment in the show where my zombie character sings up to a woman in a balcony. And It's Too Soon to Know, which is like a jazz standard. And I just changed the words around. I don't remember that, but it was about being a zombie and that we could be in love. So, that got me into like high school plays and stuff, which I didn't enjoy. I loved I loved the people around me and I loved that teacher. But it was like, I didn't really like being in those shows. I didn't like working on them that much. But before I knew it, that meant I was like auditioning for acting programs. And because I'm a dual Canadian US citizen, I could audition for American programs more easily and, seriously consider them. And anyway, so I wound up going to one in New York that was the State University of New York at Purchase College, which in 2010 was considered like one of the best acting schools. And it also happened to be a state school. So it wasn't like that unbelievably crazy expensive, like, NYU or something. And that's not to say I paid for it. I'm super, super privileged. My parents paid for all that. And so I went to that school. That was very mixed. I left that school. There was kind of an audition-y kind of thing we would do for industry people. And so I got an agent from that in LA and later an agent in Toronto. And so I really thought like it was all going to work out. And I was auditioning. And this guy in LA who turned out to be a real sleazebag. And I was so naive. I couldn't see this, but he literally said to me, I think you got upswing potential. You should just move out to LA and you'll be busy. I'll set up meetings for you. It's going to be great. And so I actually took him at his word and moved to LA. And it was a disaster. And I was just there being I just was a total failure, like classic, as cliched as you can possibly be. Like this young, bright-eyed kid moves out to California to be a star and got nowhere at all.
That's a story that's out there already. It's true.
Yeah. It's like the most cliched story. And, so what happened was I got this crappy room in a kind of crappy house. And it's actually a cool old house in Eagle Rock. It was like a really, really old, cool house, but it was tiny and my room was tiny. So to pay rent, I got a job with Greenpeace. I was applying to be a dishwasher at a diner. It's weird. This all sounds like some really corny, like 50s story. And maybe because of all the old crap I always put. It's like that's how I chose to make my life this corny story. But I was applying at a diner in Eagle Rock to be a dishwasher. And while I was getting the manager my resume, there was someone sitting at the bar, like the diner bar thing, having a milkshake. And they overheard me begging for a job. And they came up to me and they said, "Hey, I work for Greenpeace. And I think you could be a canvasser. You could be a door-to-door like subscription seeker for Greenpeace." So I wound up doing that. And that's like the as quickly as I can tell that.
So, I mean, that requires, I find that interesting, Sammy, because what you're basically telling me is that somebody overheard you exercising the audacity to beg for a job and said you would do well at door to door, which requires audacity, which you've always said isn't your natural go-to. But you know how to somehow summon it. I think that's a pretty interesting thread. I also just love that I had to just stop you. I could have not stopped you and then unpacked like NYU or not NYU, New York and acting school and LA and a sleazy manager and a diner. Like you're right. Like all of this is fantastic story, but also just the fact that like, man, the path that people go to be at a place. And in music, all you ever see is the presentation of the songs and the assumptions you make about the person that's embodying those songs. If you're a listener, are just so full of assumption and just very almost like one dimensional, right? Like, and so you don't see these kinds of things, which is why the conversations are always so much more interesting. And, and the avenue through theater and your own sort of self-awareness that like, the thread was always music. Like I thought it was acting. I thought it was theater maybe, or whatever version, but it only happened because I sang a song inside of a play, all these kinds of things. So by this point you said like that takes you up to like 2015. And you're looking at a choice, I'm guessing by that point, about what you want to do with your life and you're in LA. So how did that turn its way? Did that turn its way back to music, back to Canada right away at that point or?
Yeah. So I guess I had nothing but choice because, nothing was happening. And I just think what happened was I think I went from LA to Toronto because, through the LA thing, I got in contact with a Toronto agent. And then they told me the same story and said, well, come to Toronto and you'll be really busy and you'll kill it out here. Just come to Toronto because, this is a reputable agency and you'll do great. And so I went to Toronto and the same thing happened where, I did audition and I liked this agent a lot. He was a nice guy. He was not sleazy, but it just wasn't working, it doesn't for a lot of people and for most people in acting. And then I just started working in restaurants and, it's pretty boring story, I guess, to me, but like it was just Toronto, LA, Toronto, New York, Toronto, Edmonton, New York, Edmonton, Toronto, New York. I think that's actually what happened. It was that many moves. And it was always trying to chase where I could maybe get acting stuff to happen. And all the while, all I was really, truly applying myself in with like my whole heart was continuing to write music and sing. And so by 2018, I found myself back in New York. And through a friend of a friend, I got a job with zero experience. And this is not about me being audacious. It's just about someone being nice. And they like threw me a bone and they got me a job very last minute as an assistant to a prop master for a TV show. And the previous assistant to the prop master had a mental breakdown. And so they were really desperate to find someone stupid enough to come in and clean up this mess that the previous assistant had made. And so I'm sure what happened was anyone in the industry didn't want to come in and do this because it wasn't worth their time and energy to not only work on all the stuff coming in every day, but to go back in time for like 2 seasons of a TV show and clean up all the mistakes someone had made. So, but they knew I'd be willing to do pretty much anything. So I came in and I did that job. It was really stressful. But again, it was cool because I was living in Jersey City with my brother for a bit because we found a really cheap thing. And then I would take the train, many trains from Jersey City into Manhattan through to Brooklyn and then far, far, far east into deep East Queens. And that was about 2.5 hours of commuting every day. And that was awesome time for writing because I found the trains were like an ideal environment for focusing and writing. It's like white noise. And you can literally sing and talk out loud without really scaring people too badly because they're used to crazy people doing that all the time. And there's so much noise that doesn't really matter. So it was a perfect place to listen to music and to write music. And then I'd go back to my apartment and really flesh out these ideas I had. So by 2018 into 19, I was working like crazy. And I think what it was 2018 at one point I was back in Edmonton and I made an EP with Stuff Franchuk, just 4 songs. And then, a year and a half or so, or 2 years after that, at this point, I had made my way into accounting for TV shows, which is completely insane because I literally didn't finish high school math. And for whatever reason, they decided I was qualified. And I was suddenly making pretty good money. Like I was living very comfortably and saving money like fast. And I hated my life. And I was so bored sitting at this desk, counting up lunch receipts and deciding like whose sandwiches could be reimbursed or not.
Yeah.
And I just picked up my phone and I was like, this is insane. I can't do this anymore. And I wrote to Scott Franchuk and Harry Gregg here in Edmonton at Riverdale Recorders. And I said like, listen, I hate my life. All I do is write music and go to open mics. I need to do this. I don't care if it's a vanity project because it's all I want to do. I have a bunch of money I saved from working in accounting, which is horrible. What will it cost to make an album? And they were like, of course we'll do it. So I came back to Edmonton, started recording. We did like 2 songs. And then, as you know, early 2020, the whole world fell apart.
Yeah.
And so it's such a douchey thing to say, but it was kind of lucky for me because I was pretty lost anyway. And it kind of forced me to totally reset. And all I had going on were these songs and this money I had saved to make an album with Scott and Harry in Edmonton. And because of the times, everyone had a bunch of free time they didn't want to have. So suddenly all these great musicians were free to come into the studio safely and work on my stuff. And so, we had the time and the resources to do that. So that was my first album. And then from doing that first album, thank God I didn't look back. I didn't go, okay, that was fun, let me go back to LA or something.
Done.
Yeah. It was like, no more nonsense, no more wasting time, no more ego, and no more trying to please everyone else. Like I finally thought, who cares? It's just, none of this matters. We're all going to die soon. So I'm just going to work on what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And so from then till now, I've just been steadily working on this, on doing what I really love. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, there's so much in there, Sammy. That's really, it's really fun. What's fun to me is, you made a reference before about this is sort of like an old script of some sorts, but it's like there's a number of eras of script. Like While You Talk, like The Diner was a very specific visual picture. And again, like, because we're so informed from movies, from Hollywood, but even you just describing, like, I ended up on a train for 2.5 hours. Well, how immortalized is the picture of the kind of the tortured young person sitting on the long subway rides in New York City? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Amongst a bunch of crazies, but somehow, comfortable in that chaos. It's just quite an idolized concept in film. So it's really easy to picture romantic. It's been romanticized. So it's very easy to picture what you're talking about. I am very interested though because you just kind of said, like, I was done with pleasing others, and it had crossed my brain when you started saying, like, really the path was probably like to New York, Edmonton to New York to LA to Toronto, back to New York, maybe back to Toronto, back to LA. And like, so often a big part of the artist pursuit, and everybody comes to their point of honesty at different places, as a precursor to this, is that big pursuit is like, we're just driven by this thing about validation, and it's a mixed bag. I mean, it's the validation just of our own inner voice.
Totally.
In very much truth, like, we're trying to get to a point where the inner voice is saying, like, that was good. Like, what you're doing is good. You're really like, or you belong, but you're also in a lot of different ways. And I'm not qualified, obviously, to be the psychoanalyst, but I think, we blend and mix, or at least take into another compartment the external validation of people. So when we're young, it's similar to what you were describing, is like, maybe all it took was somebody we didn't know was sleazy saying, if you come here, you'll be busy. And how many people have followed their dream, like you said, like in a very cliche, again, another sort of romanticized storyline, whether it's Coyote Ugly or some other version where somebody chases their way to a version of, like, if you come to this place only, or if you're in the same area as these people, something will happen for you. And when all you want is for that thing to happen. And if anybody, and it starts with a lot of us, sometimes is why I like to ask people about their family and their upbringing. And sometimes it's just like how strong the voice of your family is that tells you you're great, you're going to be great, you should do this. Or maybe you don't have it there, and it's somebody externally, the first time they tell you you're actually really good. That's all it takes for you to chase a career path, right? And so bouncing so many places in so many ways, which feels like you were just taking every opportunity of somebody telling you that maybe there's something for you here.
I was always chasing them.
To landing at a place where you say, like, I needed to say, like, I'm not doing this for anybody else anymore. Was that like a big sort of revelation moment that came out of making the record, like the achievement of the record itself, that first one?
It was probably, so it's a couple of things. Making the first album, was the most fun I ever had in my life. It was the best, most satisfying, enriching, exciting experience of my life. And then it was still, COVID, and someone about my age who was a friend of the family suddenly died, and that was really a big turning point too, because I felt like I was making little steps in the right direction, but that death actually sort of pushed me a lot further into that direction. And it got to the point where I remember clearly there was one night where I sat down with my parents and I said, I'm going to be a loser now. Like I said, in your eyes, maybe I'm not going to be achieving anything anymore, because all I'm going to do is work on the music. And so for a long time, it's not going to look too good. There won't be much to talk about. Won't be much good news.
How old are you at that point, Sammy?
Already too old to be saying that for the first time, I think. Well, now I'm 34, so that was 2020.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I only
never did high
ask
school
because
math.
I only ask because but you did accounting. But
yeah.
I only ask because a lot of people wouldn't necessarily feel like they owed their parents that explanation anywhere past their early 20s.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was partly
I'm
because
curious.
I was back here. I had left New York because of COVID, and they were asking me to come back to the New York job, and I was so torn. I thought, if I go back to this very comfortable life in New York, it will actually probably be a very unhappy one. Or I could tell them, sorry, I'm not coming back, and stay in Edmonton for a while and keep focusing on music exclusively. And so that was really, I think, what it was. And that's why I felt I should explain it, because I basically was saying, hey, can I stay here for a while and stop having an income? And they, of course, well, not of course, they luckily were super supportive and always have been. And I found other work, and I found some freelance stuff. And around that same time, I met who's now my partner. And we got a place together here in Edmonton, and it was the best time of my life. Finally, I was happy all the time, and more or less. And I felt like I was doing the right thing, and I no longer had this need to check in with external voices, and
that's really
ask
huge
for validation.
Yeah, that's really huge. Obviously, to be able to have the freedom to have that conversation with your parents, probably, again, this is an outside observation, but sometimes you need somebody to have that conversation with to actually just validate it for yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That you're actually telling yourself, I need permission to do this thing. Sometimes when you're asking permission of a loved one, you're really asking permission yourself. I think that's really huge. Especially just in the pursuit of music and the arts. It's not a normal career path. It's not a degree program, and then you graduate to a set of options. So it's so messy. And I love how absolutely messy your path seems to be. Like, it makes for a great, not in a way that disparage what you went through in all of that. But just, it's such a great illustration of how messy it can be when you're just willing to chase the thing and just keep chasing the thing, and not settle for things. Because clearly you would have settled on something a lot sooner, just like the tension you said about going back to New York, that, a lot of people settle on that tension a lot earlier. Especially if things aren't working out. There's, and that takes a lot of tenacity, which is pretty adjacent to audacity. So it keeps creeping back up for you in there, even if you didn't think it was there. Well, I mean, Sammy, there's a couple things I want to dig into with you, if I can, really quick, and not keep taking up too much time. But I'm so interested about your career and where you're at. One of them is a bit more just about the genre and how you're expressing yourself in the styles and your song structures and layouts, which isn't locked in to what I would call retro, because I feel like that's too
Mhm.
yeah too much of a pejorative now.
Yeah.
But it's a wide span, so I get how people maybe use it sometimes. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you about, because you've told me just about your personal journey a little bit here, and it really struck out to me when I was reading some things in your bio when you were talking about just you learning, like, how to sort of what you were learning inside of pursuing music, and you're like, and sort of escaping into music and all these things. And you've talked about how these long train rides or these different things that gave you these long opportunities to really just, go inside of yourself to go to work on like, what do I want to do? What inspires me to come up with ideas, to refine ideas, which is so much what it is, right? And I think because you hear a lot of artists when they talk who are sort of at the very like career level, like even award winning, artists talk about the change in their biggest change in their career is how they went from having sort of all that time and that breeding ground of ideas and creativity to all of a sudden being in the machinery of a career
Mhm.
and a schedule and all these things that all of a sudden remove all of that time, and how do you stay in that place? So you hear it from that end a lot, but hearing it sort of in your perspective about, where you're at in your life in that, feeding it and then making a change to actually like dedicate yourself to it. But in that sort of like exploration, you sort of made a comment in your bio about being a queer kid in the prairies, um, and figuring everything out about that and sort of how you belong or where you belong inside of music instead of before you
Mhm.
had to sort of figure it out with real people, which I found a
Yeah.
really interesting statement. I guess the question I want to ask you about that is, a lot of it's about identity, right? And I think what's interesting in music is in a lot of, the way the world would classify it as subsections of genre, of music, of all these things. I want to make sure I put this the right way. So it's interesting to me how, when identity kind of gets forced up into the conversation along with just art and inspiration and, what we feel like we're meant to do, or even if it doesn't have a label of calling on it, just the thing that you've already referred to, the thing that actually truly makes you the happiest, like you talked about the
Mhm.
happiest days. Not everybody has identity forced into that conversation, right?
Mhm.
And so in a very, I don't equate this the same at all, but I grew up in an extremely religious household, right? So very Christian. The only kind of music I could listen to when I had the burgeoning passion for music, and very similar to you in a way, like I was writing songs before I had ever sung for anybody, before I knew any instruments.
Yeah.
I could form melodies and words together in my head, and I wrote them all out on paper. I had a songbook and I knew the
Yeah.
melodies in my head type thing. So it was there for me for a very young age. But I was forced to keep that inside of this very prescribed box, right?
Yeah.
Which was, it had to be Christian music. It had to be gospel music. If
Mhm.
it went outside of that, it's not just about music anymore. It's about like everything else, right? Like my entire worldview that was being kind of pushed upon me at a young age was being forced into the identity, and I didn't know it, all right? But the identity of me as an artist, as a musician, of the thing that made me the happiest, that I knew from a young age would make me the happiest to do the rest of my life, was
Yeah.
being forced and integrated. And then when I got a little older into my mid-teen years, I started to also see the pressures of people who pursued this were being forced to carry that identity to everybody else in their music.
Yeah.
If all they wanted to be was a musician, they don't want to be a Christian musician. And I became really aware
Yeah.
of that by like age 13 only. And so I read a statement like yours, and I often just think empathetically along the lines of
Mhm.
um, people who openly talk about being queer in the arts are somehow, it feels like maybe, and this is my perception, so it becomes my question, that they
Mhm.
become forced to carry the flag of their identity
Right.
as in the vehicle of what they're pursuing in art.
Right. Right.
which doesn't always seem fair. And some people don't have any problem with it. But I'm just wondering having made that statement about, you being able to find, some things that you needed as just in your own diving into music. I'm just wondering how that's happened for you in all of this. Like, have you felt like you've had to bring your identity into it? Do you feel like there's pressure?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking me about that. It's something I didn't ever talk about for a very, very long time. And I think it's probably because for me, I didn't feel it mattered,
Mm-hmm.
But then as I worked more on music and sang for people more, and when it got to a place where I'd have to I had to begin to know how to contextualize myself for other people, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I began to feel it really did matter. Because how do I say it? Like, it should go without saying that I had like the most privileged life. My parents could send me to school. I grew up very comfortable as this white guy in a affluent kind of world. But at the same time, I did always sort of have this simmering struggle with trying to figure out how I fit in at all. And I didn't find it with friends. I didn't find it entirely with family when it comes to things like, realizing you're queer, uh, I never heard of any people like me. And I never knew that I was meeting anybody like me because no one talked about it. And so I know for sure now it had a lot to do with me sort of withdrawing and surrounding myself with musical personalities. I'm sure you can tell I never articulate this, so I don't really know what I'm saying, but
no, that's totally fair.
It's like, it was like a blessing and a curse, this discomfort, because it kind of forced me early on to find my own happy places, and like to find my own comfort. And for me, that was those were old records. And I don't know, it just so happens that a lot of the people who I really idolized, one off the top of my head is Dusty Springfield. Dusty Springfield is one of my all-time favorite artists and someone I listen to all the time. And, she was a gay woman from England. And, I loved girl group stuff. And it just was always super important to me. And that, in turn, shaped how I make music. And so I feel, especially now when things are going in the direction they're going, in Alberta and obviously in the US, I have a different mindset now than I used to. I used to think that, the music can speak for itself and that's all you need to say. I don't really think that's true anymore, because I think representation is super important. And if I can maybe be an artist that some other weirdo little kid could listen to and see as an example and sort of connect to, maybe we'll never meet, but if I could be like a comfortable character in their life, that's really, really, really crucial and really important to me. And so that really is like my dream. My dream is to make a record, first of all, because I love records, but to make one that will appeal to young people like I was and can be a comfort to them, So I don't think it would make any sense for me to leave out my orientation, or whatever you want to call it, wherever I am on the spectrum. I don't even really know or care. Like it's so weird. It's like it doesn't matter, but it does. And I still haven't really figured out how to articulate that, obviously.
I don't know that you have to more than that. I think
I think the most curious and incredible thing about humanity is being comfortable with opposing ideas and we live with them every day, right? Like,
Yeah.
or seemingly opposing ideas or incongruent concepts. That we have that function and ability. So yeah, and I think that simply by I like it. I like that I identify it more like a spectrum now, because it doesn't mean you have to plot yourself somewhere. You can just say that
Right.
it's not a singular, it's not a graphed line.
No,
It's
thank God, like
yeah, absolutely. Like,
it,
because
it
all
never
people would
was, and it,
do, yeah, all people ever did was use it to categorize and put people in a
yeah.
box and make them choose who is the other. And a lot of what you described is that feeling of being made to feel like the other, which why it becomes so important to, like, I love that you use the term a comfortable character. I think that's an incredible way to articulate it, actually, that you look for that. You need those, like, and again, my personal experience, like when I say, like, I sort of understand this, like this sort of strange, like, marriage inside of the art of identity with, with just your love of the art or
Hmm.
creativity. But then all these weird ways that it got spun out in society and
Hmm.
culture. But in no way, I want to make it really clear, really equates with the experience of queer people and what they've had to, like, none of that. I never had to deal with any version of external pressure
Mm.
or hatred or bigotry or prejudice or any, like, so none of that really, like, because obviously the area of the world we're growing up with made it ridiculously easy for me. But um but my pursuit was, like, I hated that box.
Hmm.
And my comfortable characters were people that were comfortable saying that they were still at that age believers, but weren't living inside that box or operating inside of it, and they
Right.
were kind of just regular people, right? And I needed to
Yeah.
see those people. So I totally understand what you're saying. um
Yeah.
until you get a lot older, like where I am now and have been for quite a while, where you achieve some version of enlightenment and can step outside of all that. But I mean, for you to obviously get to that place, like you said, even with what's happening in the world right now, I appreciate you saying that too, of being willing to accept. I think it's unfair when people put that on others, right? That to say, like, you have a responsibility, or as if, like, it should make its way even to the lyrics of your songs or things like that,
Mm.
sort of to that level of extremity. But for you
Yeah.
to choose to say, um, in a sense, just the paying it forward, the passing it on, to say, like, this was my experience when I was young.
Hmm.
I found myself in that, like, why wouldn't I, if I get to now make music, why wouldn't I want to be that same thing for somebody else and
Yeah.
maybe give them
And well,
an
and
easier path?
it's not like it's not like it's become like a branding decision or something.
No,
It's just
no,
like
I don't see
it's
that
just
at all.
about,
That's why I was
yeah.
curious.
It's
Yeah.
just, I just think it's important to. It's like, well, if I'm gonna write like a bio, I mean, what, you know that is the time and place to say who you
Yeah.
are. So
Yeah.
why not say who you actually are? It's ridiculous to
Well, that's why it stood out to me,
to.
Sammy, because
Mm.
your long bio, like, and to be upfront, I couldn't even count the thousands of bios. I've done so many grants and award things, from the Junos all the way down to, like, the Edmonton Music Prize and every single thing in between, like,
Hmm.
for a long time, for the last, like, 18 years of my life. I've read so many, and there's, like, there's lots of sections of your bio that really just they read like the sales pitch, like a lot of us have to. Like, we have to,
For sure.
we
Yeah.
have to sort of, like, here's my achievements, here's the things that show that I'm a part of this group of peers, to validate, your reason to listen to me or book me for a show or whatever. So that's
Yeah.
always there. But right plunk in the middle was this paragraph, that was like a quotation of you explaining, you know, yourself. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I think it was really well written, and left me with a lot of curiosity. Just because I
No,
see
thank you.
so often
Yeah.
whether people have that pressure or whether they feel like that's something they have to do or whether they feel it's unfair or whether they feel like, sort of like you said, like I actually want to, in this certain way or this version, sort of be something for somebody else. So,
Yeah.
I don't know
That
where
was
like
really
that.
important to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important for me to talk about the real reasons because the surfacey way it gets talked about is so disappointing, right? In media,
Mhm.
like when someone says, well, you don't look or sound or act queer. So like, why do you feel like you need to talk about it? Like when people say things like that, it's just such a miss, right? It's like an
Mhm.
absolute, like contributing to the problem kind of
Oh, yeah.
conversation.
That's
So it's important,
yeah.
I think, to say like, why was this a part of who you are and how you got to where you are
Mhm.
and what you kind of want to do now. But
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate
yeah,
real quick that I think it actually is becoming crucial. Like I think that things are going so badly that we're sliding into, not to get all soapboxy and political, but it really is becoming like a scary time. And you can see clearly how it's no longer going to be, if we're not really looking out for each other and making sure that everybody is safe to
yeah,
be who they want to be, uh, we could very easily continue to slide into a very, very dark place um, where you can't be yourself.
yeah. And you're right. And it feels like so much work was done by so many people and sacrifice to get to where we thought we were, to suddenly feel threatened that's going to be made useless or meaningless feels so unfair also for the people
Yeah.
who came before and gave so much to get there. So I totally agree with you. So here's the interesting pivot then. The last part I want to just talk about is like, your expression of like a very, I mean, it shows up in here, but like the very like Roy Orbison-esque at sometimes, the very Buddy Holly-esque, I can't remember the name of the song, sorry, but it was like your first or second single from this that you had out that I was listening to. And it was very big
Oh,
band,
the Motown
feel.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just very like, I've only seen you. So for the record, I've also only seen you at like the Folk Fest Tweeners, right? The Rhea
Yeah.
Marches, group. And so the minute I heard that song, I was like, this is just so like, I'm a lot older. So I heard a lot of that music. What's funny is when I heard music like that, I thought it was so old. Now I realize I was only about 15 to 20 years removed from that
Yeah.
music when I was a kid in the late 80s. Um,
Yeah.
and it felt like forever back for me
Hmm.
back then. Um, but now when I hear that song of yours, I feel it's very familiar, like the structure of it,
Hmm.
the choices that you make, just the straight time four on the snare kind of, you know what I mean? Very forward beat that's just drive it all the way through and let the horns and the strings and the backgrounds do their work that really sort of carry all the different textures. And it's very familiar. And I think that's what people love, right? And it becomes a really delicate line to not become super niche because
Right.
you identify very much with your expression influenced by things that we attach, not as
Yeah.
genre, like, because you can't just say it's like rock, metal, hip hop, R&B, pop, like those things span decades too. But when you just
Hmm.
use those terms, you think about them in the most modern version quite often. Whereas people will like quickly spin off the subgenres that are sort of stuck in like Buddy Holly era of rock and roll is very different than the Eagles era of rock and roll, which is very different. So, um, I'm just curious how you felt in developing this,
Hmm.
and now you're like into, because you made a quick caveat, you made like this country-ish record with Dana Wiley that was very cool and got some recognition. So that kind of was like a bit of a sidestep, not
Hmm.
terribly though. Like honestly, like Johnny Cash era of country, like was pretty close in sometimes to crooner
Yeah.
music in the same
Yeah.
era of the late 50s and early 60s. Um, but even to this new record, when I hear these tracks, I'm just curious how you feel about continuing to develop this voice of yours and not just
Hmm.
your singing voice, which is very characteristic, but the voice of the whole music. And whether you feel like you don't give a shit about niche, you don't think about that, you don't care about how people are going to slot you in or categorize you, whether that's limiting or whether you feel there's opportunity. I'm just curious what your feelings have been as you've like decided to go all out on it.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. It was cool to get to answer that because, sometimes I'll talk about like influences or whatever, but rarely do I get to talk about like how I approach expressing myself in a way that's reflective of those influences and like how conscious I am of that. In this case, I gotta say, I was literally unconscious because this song came to me in a dream, 100%. So, unfortunately, with this song as an example, I can't actually answer your question because I didn't think about it. I had a dream where I was watching someone record in a studio and they were singing the chorus over and over again. They were trying to comp the vocal and get it right. And so I woke up and it was stuck in my head. And so that kind of gave me permission to, like you said, like not care at all about how it's perceived because it really feels like I didn't come up with it. And in that way, the song is really exceptional. Every other song on the album, I was much more not careful, but sort of maybe I could put it this way, like with Over the Hardest Part, which is the Motown song you're talking about, that one, I knew it was contrived and I loved that about it. Like I loved the fun project of trying to make my version of a Motown record. And that's all it was. That's all I cared about for that song. But all the other songs are more nuanced and there is more thought going into the production. And because I do care how I'm perceived by, other music nerds. And I don't want to be pigeonholed as like a tribute artist or like a quote unquote retro crooner. So that really does matter to me. So with a song like Blue or like Marjorie or Matter of Time, like the first track on the album, those I feel are actually very difficult to categorize because what influenced me to make those songs, I can't help but kind of wear on my sleeve. But the making of the record and the production and the mix and all that, to whatever extent I can have an influence on the people who actually work on the production or the mixing or the mastering, in those cases, it becomes more technical. Then I am less sort of laissez-faire about the like construction of the song. Like at that point, it's like, okay, this sort of loose, artsy, it's all about just how it feels moment is sort of past. Like that was done with when I wrote the song and sang the song. But when it comes to actually making like a product, I am more intentional and less just free spirited in a way. So like I'll want it to be apparent to people listening to certain songs that like, oh yeah, that was a bit of a Roy Orbison thing. But I also want them to think, well, what was that guitar? Like that sounded like Wilco, So I really want it to be multifaceted. And
Well,
so
I mean,
most
your
of my
song
music,
Blue,
I think,
your song Blue, if I can, sorry, Sammy, that I just made me think, like I was watching your live performance video of that, and you have Aldine on it and you have Connor playing this jangly guitar, which is to the point that you just made. I feel like a lot of people would more fairly get critiqued as pigeonholing or being tribute-esque, because they'll literally go down to Nashville to use players that like can play the way that country was recorded, before it became pop country. So they'll go down and like play with a certain group of players to get that sound, or go to LA to get a certain sound, a Motown sound out of a studio somewhere, to ensure that it happens. I think it's very different. I don't know if everybody, non-musicians who listen to this always understand how hard it is to be a solo artist and go into a record and realize you're putting your faith in the hands of other players, but especially producers, and people mixing to believe the vision that you have for it, and to be able to achieve that. Like, you're trusting a lot of people to get the thing to way it is in your head. And that's so
Totally.
hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to do. So for you to achieve those things and those sounds, I think is really, a tip of the hat to obviously your ability to communicate what you wanted, and also to use people, very talented people from here, rather than run off somewhere else. I think probably, if I'm guessing, and maybe you see it the same way, probably go a long way to making sure that it still has an authentic, like, this is like a current artist interpreting inspiration rather than just mimicking.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that was so important to me. Like, I have nothing against doing like the whole, Nashville experience. Like, if you can afford that, that sounds like fun. But, it also kind of sounds like a nightmare, or it could become a nightmare very quickly, because you're not actually, I don't feel like you're doing it for the right reason at that point. Like, I mean, I would want to go see those people play, but I don't know if I want to try and force myself into that world. Like, I'm much more interested in presenting a slice of like my life and my world.
Yeah.
And that's a space in which I can be more honest and more expressive and more relaxed. So if I can feel those ways, then I think people who hear the music will feel that way too. Or hopefully they can get a glimpse into who I really am. And like, when I'm working with people I like and who I know, then suddenly so much labor is cut out of the equation. I mean, not just like time, but like emotionally and expressively. Like, I can relax with these people and not be afraid of stepping on toes. I can just actually say what I like and what I want. And I trust them because I know them. And so I'm more open to their ideas. And suddenly it's like, I don't feel so much like a solo artist because I'm surrounded by people who I'm actually communicating with very openly. So it's very collaborative, and things will go in directions that I didn't preconceive. Thank God, or it would sound very stiff, I think. And, the producer of this album, Renee / Rennie Wilson, that was kind of funny. Like, he was by far the most outsider-ish in the process. Like, he was the person I knew least, and yet I gave him arguably like the most control. And that was because I wanted somebody who wouldn't necessarily I wanted like a director, like someone who could be like a director in a play. And I say that because that's kind of all I really know about hierarchy in like a creative process. But I didn't want a friend of mine to produce the album, because I was really interested in working with somebody who would come from away, like someone with really outside influences and ideas I thought would enrich my music, because I think in this case, the songs and my ideas were strong enough that they could dance with that. It wouldn't just be like two buddies in a room on the same wavelength. I wanted it to sound more kind of unpredictable. Like, I wanted to be surprised by his ideas, and I was very open to totally like out of left field notions. And we'd have like some intense conversations, and that was just a joy to me. And I think that that's a huge credit to Renee. And one other thing, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but like,
sorry,
someone in the album who's super essential, not everyone is, but Cassia Hardy, who for a long time was the leader of the Edmonton band Wares. I had become friends with her, and I sought her out as my creative partner in this album because of her incredible, like, natural leadership and strength in musical ideas. And also because our music is nearly polar opposite. It's like really badass, hard driving punk in Cassia's world, and like lilting, croony, twee old man music a lot of the time for me. And so together, I thought it made a really interesting kind of Yes, much stronger sort of structure than if I had just worked in my comfort zone all the time, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't even know what your question was anymore because I just started
No,
rambling about the album.
that's the experience though. That's what you're explaining, at least the experience, and where, like, I guess what's interesting to me in there, Sammy, is that underneath all that, what you expressed in there in your choice of producer and the choice to work with somebody who's so opposite, I just think what's interesting is there's such a confidence in that. And I think it just goes back to what you were saying at the very beginning is like, I asked you about audacity and you said, no, that's not my natural, like, this isn't a natural characteristic. This is a thing that comes out of me in music, and it just seems so common in all of your stories so far, that when it comes to music in your life, you have this confidence to believe in your songs or your vision, this
Yeah, but
confidence
we're
to
talking
ask.
about music.
That's what I mean is that, I guess the reason I'm pointing it out is I sometimes can't find a proper way to explain to people who just aren't musicians, like, why it is such a powerful force. Like, there's people, I've heard lots of people who aren't musicians or creatives talk about the power of music in their life and how it does the things it does and the impact it can have from, in bringing back incredible memories to the way it moves us to like make big decisions in our life and all that stuff. But from the inside, it's so hard to articulate the power of it. And so you've essentially articulated through your entire story that like there's one way in your life that you're able to sort of express the confidence in who you are, to have audacity to like know what you wanted to do, to bring people in who are complete opposites of you and still trust that it's going to be the right choice and the right thing, that you'd even have the ability to trust them in the first place is built on this common shared love of music and what it can do if you can align yourselves around it. Which is like, I think just what the beauty of so much of, these pursuits and these efforts that we make, whether they just be vanity projects or so we think sometimes, and then they turn into, an actual path forward finally for us, which, is what it sounds like so much in your career to this point. So you have a record that's coming out officially this week. You have a bunch of tour dates that follow it, which, we'll have links in the things we put out here for people. I hope, if people are along the dotted line of those shows, get a chance to get out and see and hear you. Do you find that you have, I guess this is my last question, just because it maybe dovetails when I'm talking about your tour dates and what I talked to you before about, your chosen how you express your music in the different genre crossing. Do you have a really varied audience? Do you have a lot of different demographics and even decades represented in people as a result? Does it actually sort of show itself in, pretty wide range?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, it's like I've only really seriously been pursuing performing my music since like 2020, but there wasn't much going on then, so it's taken a long time to begin to see like patterns, and to even be around long enough to have anyone come to my shows. But it's funny, I was thinking about that just a day or two ago as I invite people to come to shows. It's pretty funny the people I'm writing to, because it's like there's like really young kind of like indie punky people, and then there's like people who are so old like I hope they know how to respond to my email, and like everyone in between. So but it's that makes me really happy, because I think that there's different stuff in the different songs to appeal to all sorts of different people. Like there might be like a Motown song, there might be like a country crooner song, and then there might be like a Neil Young song, and then for whatever reason there's like a Buck Meeky like Wilco thing. So it's like it's all over the place, and that's really stimulating to me. And I think I'm gonna keep going in that direction. Like I love the eclecticism that I'm allowed to kind of play with in a show, and it's more fun that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's pretty cool when I see like uh, a table of some super young folks beside like the 85-year-old couple from Calgary who are like longtime CKUA supporters, you know.
Yep.
It makes me
Yeah.
really happy that those people can be in the same room and both enjoy the music.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really fun.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, it's been a real treat to talk to you, Sammy. I appreciate you being really open about your story. And at one point in the middle, you said this is probably really boring, and it's literally the opposite. I find it really interesting. I'm glad I asked you to stop and explain. And then we got to, unpack all of that stuff. Anyway, I think it's really great. I appreciate you taking the time to tell the story. I am really interested to continue to see, what comes next. Like, a lot happens, and a record creates a whole new set of opportunities and challenges too, as an artist.
Yeah.
And the challenge always to keep going. So just looking forward to seeing more. I hope people take the chance to get out and see you play when they can, and go and listen to the new record and the new songs. And a lot of them are already, if they go to YouTube, you've done a number of the tracks up there for people to listen to, and I encourage them all to go and check out the Sammy Volkov library. But thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Glenn. I really appreciate you taking the time to really listen and to talk to someone who's I feel like I'm pretty green, and you talk to some pretty badass people. So thanks for taking the time to take me seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And it's important to me, I chose the premise of doing this to talk about what the journey looks like. And 20 years in, 10 records in has a certain perspective, but the people 2 records in in today's day and age have an equally important voice. So, so I just really appreciate you being articulate and willing to be vulnerable and talk about it all. So it's great. It's what makes the thing go around. So yeah, we'll hopefully see you around and talk again soon.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Alexi. Stick around for post-fame with me and my dad. And ready.
You were born ready. Okay, welcome to
part 2.
I like to prefer to call it letter B.
Oh.
This is episode 36, post-fame B.
For all my viewers at home, we basically just had a 24-minute ripper of a session. I'd say, honestly, in terms of how funny I was in it, probably top 4 episodes that we've recorded.
Top 4 out of 36, which is the theme of our ripper.
Yes.
Landing on why number 36 seemed like a big deal to you, and
felt like a big number to me.
56 also figured prominently.
Yeah, that one's going to be a banger. We don't know why yet, but that is for us to stay tuned.
I have until 46 to get my act together.
Get your act together.
Tighten up
stuff. The Junos are happening, which are the Canadian Grammys. We went over that entire list, but maybe we'll
ran over the whole list, and
maybe we'll throw in a new little bit. One little cheeky post-fame plus in the middle of the season about it.
Maybe. I mean, we still have a couple weeks to talk about it again if we want to.
This is true.
Which actually might be more appropriate after next week's guest.
And we also talked about a lot of stuff at the start, but it was honestly all yap.
There was a lot of yap.
Yeah. There was like a good 10 minutes yap. So that was my TED Talk version of the 24-minute episode that we just failed to have.
But it's important that we do capture a good conversation. And for your viewers at home, for Lexi's viewers at home, I think I just did a couple things differently that I didn't think would matter. And then I just checked all the audio and it was screwed up. So all the information nobody needed to hear. They're like, why don't you just get to it? So
you didn't tell me he's kind of cute.
What?
Sorry. I just didn't know what he looked like, and I was just pleasantly surprised.
Like? You just looked it up right now?
Good for him.
That's so funny.
I hope he doesn't listen to this, and I hope my boyfriend doesn't listen to this.
He sings classic tunes.
Good for him.
Yeah, so you did write some notes.
Yeah.
Despite a 0-point fiasco on the train.
Oh,
where
that
you
was the other thing that happened. I
almost melted
did.
down on text to me about
Yes.
absolutely nothing and just ended it with an LOL.
Yeah.
But
For all the
so
times I said I'm just a girl, that was the biggest
yeah,
moment.
okay. But anyhow, so the things were there for you to listen to and you didn't think they were, but they were.
And yet I prevailed.
And you listened, and then you had an interesting point to make about something you wished we had talked more about, which is almost never the case.
I know. I know. Shocking discovery. Yeah, I feel like it's, this is a weird episode now because I feel like I'm repeating myself, but
You
I'm
are.
not. Yeah. What I had said is that there's a section where you two are talking about his job in LA where he had to drive around quite a bit. Greenpeace. And he would pick an artist in the morning, and that's the artist he would listen to for that day. And then when he was done his job, he'd go home and try to write a song in that style. And how I thought that was just so interesting. And what I said, and I'll say it again, is like, there's been a lot of artists that we've had on or that we've heard, and when they talk about like the ways they inspire themselves or get themselves to write or practice, a lot of them say just like kind of the same things in different fonts. And this kind of felt like a little bit unique. We said that Boy Golden had done a similar thing where he made himself write every day.
Yeah, his journaling style.
And I kind of like that. Like we were talking about the forced kind of structure, but you don't see it a lot in a lot of artists, and him also getting super niche with it, and just how I imagine difficult that practice would be and committing to it every day. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, right, like the idea of I'm going to write, it's one thing to go home and just say, I'm going to learn a song from this person. Because I've gone through phases where I'm like, I'm going to learn this song that I always want to be able to play on my guitar by Bon Iver, and then I'm going to learn this song, from Death Cab, or I'm going to do something or another. But then to take that to the degree of like, I'm going to be listening to the music so much on these long commutes that I'm studying what they're doing with song structure and what makes them a little different from other things. So you have to pick up on the nuances and then to go back and try to recreate the nuances in a song.
Yeah, like subtle flex by him, not on purpose. Like that takes a lot of skill to like, listen for one day and then pull all those like intricacies out. Yeah.
There's a song I mentioned to him, I forget the title off the top of my head right now, but from his new record that it felt like a little Motown, a little big band, a little 70s stuff happening, but what I really like is I don't like it when people just try to sort of like I'm struggling for the right word, but just mimic a genre. So it feels almost copycat and almost kitsch, almost goofy. But then there's someone who just does it, and it sounds not just like somebody from now trying to make music that sounded from then, but it sounds like somebody who's like literally allowing the full inspiration of music from then, but it's still for now.
Yeah.
Right? It still feels nowish. And
it's like the true meaning of like inspired by.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not trying to copycat. I'm like, you're pulling just the right things for like now.
Yeah. And Sammy's like early in his career, and I think there's like so much that he's capable of doing. And I'm not saying like this Motown song was like perfect. It was really good, but it definitely showed me what that ability was.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very, very cool.
Sound like an American Idol judge.
I think.
Yeah, you expanded your taste. It really showed me what you were capable of tonight. Man.
Well, it's a missed opportunity that they never tapped me on the shoulder for that job. But,
seriously.
I think that was a good point. And you had sort of made a point, which for me was one of the things that was big on the conversation, which is like
the timeline meandering
and just getting a chance to like say like, wait a minute. And when I like stopped for a second to ask him to explain how he got from, you know, his storyline from 13 years old Edmonton to what seems like a young adult in LA with an agent, you know, working for
Yeah.
Greenpeace, and find out that there's New York and Toronto and LA and
Yeah.
all around multiple times together in between. All of that happening before he even recorded his first record.
Which I love.
Was, and I think what was sweet about it was he thought that it was boring, which is why he was skipping it. And I'm like,
Not the case.
this is interesting. It says so much. There's so much that it says about you and the way that that you kind of chased this around. So anyhow, I thought all that was really cool. A good episode. I liked talking to somebody who's, you know, when you're early, there's a different version of trying to evaluate what's happening
Mm-hmm.
than when you're 20 years down the road and you're evaluating
In
what's
hindsight.
happened primarily,
Yeah.
not what's happening. So you just get a different taste, and that's why it's important for me to have
These conversations.
all of them, cover the spectrum.
Yeah.
So anyhow, okay. Thanks for recovering with me, getting another 8-minute episode in. It's fantastic.
I would stay up past my bedtime just for you.
Appreciate it. I'm going to be staying up past my bedtime to finish.
That's late.
Boom. That's very late. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good night for a
Okay,
second
good
time.
night.